Let's take a look again at the structure of verse 2 and 3. Verse 2 starts with, "Now I praise you, brethren." Verse 3 starts with, "But I would have you know." The structure reveals that there's a tension in verse 2. In verse 2, you have the tension of Paul revealing, okay, you're doing something good, but there's a danger. Even though I'm praising you right now, there is something important that you're going to have to keep in mind, and I'm going to reveal it in verse 3. This is exactly the same thing Jesus used when he gave his messages to the churches written about in Revelations. Let's turn to Revelations 2 and verse 2. It says, "I know thy works, and thy labor, and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil, and thou hast tried them which say they are apostles, and are not, and hast found them liars." So he first praises them. But look at verse 4. It says, "Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love." This is also going to be important for the next video. So, even though they are doing these good things, which Christ mentions first, he has to also remind them of the things that are troubling. Sometimes a person is encouraged to address the things he is doing wrong when he understands the things that he is doing right. So, in the same way Jesus addresses the things they are doing right first, Paul also addresses the things they are doing right first. Let's turn back to 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 2. "Now I praise you, brethren, that ye remember me in all things, and keep the ordinances as I delivered them to you. But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God." And here the theme of Corinthians shines wonderfully through. Yes, Paul has a fatherly office given unto him because he preached the gospel unto them and they came to faith through him. But the following of names in a carnal way, like Paul preached against in 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 12, is not what Paul is wanting them to do. So that's why I can't simply praise them in verse 2 without having a verse 3. He needs to talk to them about this carnality of them, of following after other people. But at the same time, there's also this thing inside the Corinthian church that the women are prophesying and praying outside of the covering of their husbands. And that's also wrong. So in the same way that the husbands can't simply have Paul or Apollos as their head covering, the women praying and prophesying without their husbands as a covering is also in the wrong. If Paul would have kept simply addressing the men over here, telling them that they shouldn't have a covering and that it's simply dishonoring Christ, the woman might take this in the wrong way and start saying that women are not supposed to have their husbands as coverings because the only covering that's allowed is the covering of Christ. And so then prophesy and pray without their husbands as a covering. And that's why Paul needed to address these two things exactly in the same time, because both problems were there in Corinthians. So I think because Paul is addressing these two things at exactly the same time, people get confused because he sort of changes the subject if you haven't been keeping track of the context. But looking at the context right now, it isn't actually that quick of a change, because he's still talking about something that makes sense and something that follows naturally and quite gradually out of some things that he has been talking about at the moment. But I won't be so ignorant as to say that this passage will never be misinterpreted by the church today. A person needs to humble himself and become calm to understand what Paul was talking about, these things that happened 2,000 years ago. It's not that it's impossible to understand, it just requires a thorough look. I'm going to have to go back to the Old Testament to explain some things before I can continue looking at this passage. So bear with me, and you will see how the meaning of these verses will all be found within the Bible. Let's turn to Numbers 30, verse 3. Numbers 30, verse 3 up to 8. If a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord, and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth, and her father hear her vow, and her bond wherewith she hath bond her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she hath bond her soul shall stand. But if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth, not any of her vows or of her bounds wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand, and the Lord shall forgive her, because her father disallowed her. The father disallowed the vow, so she was freed from the vow, and now she will bear no iniquity with regards to the vow. The father preserved her, the father protected her, has the place and the ability to do so. Verse 6, and if she had at all an husband, when she vowed, or uttered aught out of her lips, wherewith she bond her soul, and her husband heard it, and held his peace at her in the day that he heard it, then her vows shall stand, and her bonds wherewith she bond her soul shall stand. But if her husband disallowed her on the day that he heard it, then he shall make her vow which she vowed, and that which she uttered with her lips, wherewith she bond her soul, of none effect, and the Lord shall forgive her. Completely forgiven. It's all taken away, because the husband took his responsibility and he disallowed the vow. Women are to be taken care after, not because God has made men rulers over them. It's because the women were given unto the men as a gift. Womankind has been given unto mankind as a gift. If you are going to be irresponsible as a man and simply disregard the woman, there will be consequences. Let's look at Judges 4 verse 6 to 9. Judges 4 verse 6 to 9. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time, and she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh, Naphtali, and said unto him, Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali, and of the children of Zebulun, And I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. And Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with thee, notwithstanding the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honour. For the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. In Judges 4, there is a prophetess. Her name is Deborah. And she perfectly understood that the man is supposed to be the covering. And so she told Barak, he should be the covering in this situation. He should take the lead. But he said, no. You, Deborah, you are going to be the covering in the situation. You are going to come with us. And so there were consequences. Sisera was sold into the hand of a woman. And you can read the rest of Judges in this book, and it does happen that way. See, Deborah was a prophetess, and she understood how the covering is supposed to be. Now these people who prophesy in 1 Corinthians 11, they are prophets, following after the manner of a prophet. So if they are a woman, they should recognize what Deborah recognized and have the covering in the correct place. Let's turn to 2 Corinthians and chapter 11. 2 Corinthians and chapter 11, verse 2. For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. This is Paul speaking. He's speaking about the church of Corinth and to the church in general, because he is the apostle to the Gentiles. He brought the gospel to the Gentiles, and we are to be presented as a chaste virgin. And if we understand the important guidelines Paul is speaking about in some of his epistles, then we will have some good guidance in this time frame. So Paul had a very big responsibility, and he worked and labored so that we as Gentiles can see that fatherly headship that he played, the office that he had. And it's beneficial to us. In the same way, a woman can realize the covering of her husband and benefit from it, that is, if he understands his responsibilities. Now we're going to go to 2 Chronicles and chapter 18. What happens in this chapter is Micah was prophesying, and God gave him the responsibility. You go there, prophesy, and you should tell the truth. But all the other prophets wasn't prophesying the same thing. Now, when prophets prophesy, prophets, like the Bible says prophets prophesy, they many times do something physical in support of the prophecy they are giving. Otherwise, they are not prophesying. Because you as a prophet, you need to convey the message. God would tell a prophet, okay, take off that piece of clothing, or go to this place, or give the message in this manner, do this to that person. So after Micah gives his prophecy, Zedekiah comes. Look at what Zedekiah does. Verse 23. Then Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, came near and smote Micaiah upon the cheek, and said, Which way went the Spirit of the Lord from me to speak unto thee? So there's a book in the Bible named Zedekiah, and as I understand it, this is probably the man. If not, the Bible does say Zedekiah was a prophet over here. And he had the responsibility to be humble and understand in the situation, because if he was going to prophesy wrong, then it was going to be on his account. But now he trusted so much in his own prophecy that he went and smote Micaiah on the face. If there is no responsibility with regards to prophecy, then this is not a bad event at all. But now there is some responsibility with regards to prophecy. And this is something we have to keep in mind when we look at 1 Corinthians 11. And the responsibility that the father and the husband has as the covering of the woman. If we look at Numbers and what Numbers said about the topic. That's Numbers 30 verse 3 to 8. Because prophesying is very much like making a vow. If you vow, then you're saying you will be able to do what you're saying you're going to do. So you're saying what you're saying is true. In the same way, when you prophesy, it's almost like a vow. What you're saying is true because it's coming from God. So Zedekiah, in a sense, he was vowing, saying this is coming from God, smoting a Micaiah on the face. Now, if he was a woman prophet, he would have the covering of her husband. But if he was a woman prophet and he did not regard her husband as her covering in that moment, what are the angels to do? Because they are the ministers for the heirs of salvation. They minister unto the prophets, conveying the law.